anybody move into a tiny house under 400 square feet, I'm going to talk about that today. I have always loved small spaces. To me, a small space just means cozy and comfortable, and it's easy to keep clean. And I grew up in a trailer in the Northwest Territories, so for me, I have no problems with small spaces. About 5 years ago, I saw my first tiny house video, and from that moment on, I knew that's what I wanted to do. I became obsessed with them. I watched every video, I read every blog, every article. It was just something that I so could see myself doing, and something that really resonated with me. I've always considered myself minimalist in training, which means that I love the idea of minimalism and the feeling that stuff doesn't own you, but I didn't know if I could do it. So that was my first hurdle. When my youngest son moved out and it was just me and the cat, I figured that was the time for me to have my adventures. It was Mama's time to have some adventures. And so I decided that was it. That was when it was going to happen. Shortly, just about over a year ago, I received a very small inheritance from a piece of property that my mom used to own. And it was enough to do the deposit for my design with my builder. And so I just went for it. When I started to research tiny houses and tiny house builders, I mean, I like the idea of building one yourself. I've seen so many videos of people that have built their tiny houses themselves, but realistically, I knew that that wasn't something I was going to be able to do. So I knew I wanted to have it built, but I didn't know where to start. And so I started researching builders in Canada. Didn't make sense to build with a builder outside of Canada. And I narrowed it down to a handful that I actually wanted to go and see. I did see a builder in BC, in Nelson, and he was awesome. It was Nelson Tiny Homes, and I met with Seth and I toured his build, and he was amazing and the build was amazing. His home that we got to see was just beautiful. And then I also met with a builder here in Calgary, and tried to meet with a builder on the island, on Vancouver Island, just outside of Victoria, but they didn't really have time for me. I made a trip out to the island on a little holiday, and I was there for almost 2 weeks, and somehow they couldn't fit me in, so I knew that wasn't going to be the builder for me. So I had to keep looking. A couple of years ago, here in Calgary at the home show, they actually had a tiny house village, and at the tiny house village there was a builder, Teacup Tiny Homes in Lethbridge, and I met with Jen, the owner. I met her at the show, and she was just amazing. She had this enthusiasm and this energy, and you could tell that she just loved tiny houses and building them, and I thought that that was exactly the kind of energy that I wanted. So I decided to do an exploratory call with her and see what she was like, and also get some references and talk to some people that were living in her tiny houses, which I did, and that went really well. So then I decided to do a little field trip out to Lethbridge from Calgary and see some of her current builds. That was just the beginning of the rabbit hole for me when it came to designing and dreaming about my space. One of the big priorities for me in building a tiny house was not having to crawl into a loft for a bedroom. So I always wanted a gooseneck trailer, what some people call a fifth wheel trailer, where there's a little piece that comes up over the bed of the truck. And I'd seen videos where people had made that their bedroom and they could stand in it, and that was exactly what I wanted. Well, Teacup was actually building a couple of goosenecks, and so I was able to see what that would look like in person as far as the space and how that felt, and that was it. So they were the builder that I went with, and in another video I'll discuss more about the reasons I chose that specific builder versus a different builder. But yeah, so I put down my $5,000 design deposit, and we started the process. And it was so much fun, and it was so creative, and it was so collaborative working with her that I just kept getting more and more excited and more terrified, because it was just so different than anything I had done before. And I had to deal with people thinking I was a little nuts, and that was a bit of a challenge in itself. When you decide to do something different than you've always done, it confuses people. And I've always been a planner. That's what I do for a living, and the kind of person that plays it safe and doesn't do crazy shit. And so when I decided, I mean, talking about going tiny is one thing, but actually doing it is another. And I think that may have concerned a few of my friends who didn't know what I was doing. But it was so freeing too. It was so exciting and exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. And that's exactly what I needed when at this point in my life. So, I just jumped and trusted that I would find my wings on the way down, and I did. So I went tiny because it was just the right thing for me at this point in my life. I was done with owning property and having all of the expenses and the uncertainties. I had a condo, and so you have condo fees and you have special assessments, and you never know what's going to happen because somebody else is calling the shots. So yeah, I decided no, I wanted to downsize and move into a tiny house and have just the freedom and the peace that would come along with that for me. I had to ask myself, what would it be like to live in a space this small? What if I hated it? What if I got in here, I sold my place and I got in here and I realized I had made a horrible mistake? What then? And then I realized, what then? So I move into a regular home again. I sell it. I maybe keep it and rent it out. What's the worst that could happen? It was, once I really thought about what I wanted, the plans I had for my future, and what's the worst case scenario, it really wasn't that scary. I just did it, and I'm really glad that I did, because it's been perfect for me. I've been here 6 months now, and I'm in my first winter in a tiny house in Canada, and I'm experiencing everything that comes along with that. And I've yet to have a day where I think, oh my God, I made the wrong decision. It was the right decision for me, because tiny living, for me, what tiny living means is it means freedom. It means less stress. It means less worries about finances. Going tiny gives me the capacity to choose what kind of work I want to do in the future, to maybe retire early, to maybe go back to school, to certainly do some side projects that I might enjoy doing. Travel more. That was a big one for me. And also, I don't want to be in Calgary forever. I think maybe another couple years, and then once I can work full-time from home, and now I work 3 days from home, then I can move. I can move to the island. I can move to the interior of BC. I can move anywhere, because my house comes with me. And that is this feeling of freedom that you don't have when you have property. Someday I might want to own property again. Maybe a little plot of land with a view, and I can park my tiny house there, and maybe build a couple other small ones and rent them out as Airbnbs, or just have them for when friends come to visit. But there's this feeling of freedom that you have, that I have, in going tiny, that is just wonderful. It's nobody else is going to be making any decisions that have an effect on me, because I can just move, and I really value that. It's not for everybody. I say this all the time. It's not for everybody. But if it's for you, it's really cool. So that's just a little bit about why I went tiny. And, you know, in other videos, I'll get into the specifics of each thing, and the decisions I made and my design and some of the lessons that I've learned and some of the things that maybe I would do differently, and maybe some of the things I wish I had done. But for now, I hope you enjoyed that, and I will talk to you soon.